Sony FX3 has been a camera that has made it possible for me to make films the way that I enjoyed making them the most, which is minimal. This video is sponsored by Storyblocks. It's not the Alexa Mini, it's not even its oldest brother, the Sony FX9, but the versatility of this little camera is going to make up for whatever little diminishing return on the quality that you have to sacrifice for it. Today I want to quickly cover ground on the little things that I do to get the absolute most out of my FX3 to make up for those little bit of, quality differentials that you're going to get for it. And I keep saying the FX3, but I'm grouping it with the A7S3 because the A7S3 is pretty much the exact same camera, just looks different, but the image that's coming out of the camera is exactly the same. Just as a disclaimer, I'm not sitting here saying that I'm amazing and you want to get the same picture quality as me out of the FX3. This is, I understand it's not the only way to make this camera look. It's a specific look, and I know that there's many people out there who enjoy my style. So this is what I do to get my style out of this camera. And first we're gonna start off techie with the GOAT settings, if you will, for this camera. I 100% of the time have my camera set in PP8, which is S-Log3 Gamma and S-Siii Gamut, I think it's called. S-Gamut3.Cine color mode. I've just found that this is going to produce the best quality image and the best file for me to work on. And a question that I'm constantly being asked is, how do you expose for S-Log3? I'm sure people are having issues with exposing for S-Log3. It was actually a question I used to be confused by, but the more I've used this camera, the more I've started to understand. And what I do is I actually expose a little brighter than I usually would with this camera and bring the grade down a little deeper in post-production. And then I'm pretty much shooting exclusively nowadays in the A7Siii file format, 4K file format. That is going to give you the absolute best image with this camera, but on the flip side, it's also going to give you the greatest file size. I use it because the other file formats are compressed versions, so when you're editing them in your Adobe Premiere or whatever you edit in, it's harder for that editing software to play those files back. So editing A7Siii just S takes a lot more time and is a lot harder for your editing software to process because it's a compressed file. So as someone who creates for YouTube where I'm churning out a lot of videos, I need to edit fast. I don't have time to make proxies or anything. So I will take the speed of the A7Siii Si uncompressed file, even though it's larger, takes up more space. I take that any day over slower editing. The crappy thing about shooting an A7Siii Si, apart from the large file size, is that you can't use your average Joe SD card. You're going to have to get a V90 SD card or Sony Tough Cards, whole bunch of other options that you're able to get. But what I've found are inexpensive and great in quality have been the pro grade V90 SD cards. I have a 256 gigabyte card and it seems to be working flawlessly for me. Then this goes for any camera for me, not just the FX3, but I exclusively shoot at the camera's native ISO, which in this camera in bright light is ISO 640 and in low light is going to be 12800 because this camera has dual native ISO, which is what makes this the most versatile and awesome, fun to use camera I've ever used. Native ISO is going to be the ISO that your camera performs the absolute best at, and I don't want to change that or mess with that. You're going to get the most dynamic range and best image quality at native ISO. So if you're in a situation where you need to change your settings to adjust for lighting, I'm not changing my ISO, I'm not changing my shutter. What I'm changing is either my aperture or I'm adding ND or taking ND away. So before we move on from this riveting conversation on camera specs that work best and move on to a more exciting topic such as camera accessories to help make this camera better, I'd be totally remiss not to touch on today's video sponsor, who is Storyblocks. They're a company doing an absolutely incredible job in today's creative landscape, offering endless amounts of beneficial assets for creators such as me and yourself. With the unlimited all access plan, which is what I have, I'm able to download as much royalty-free 4K stock footage, Premiere templates, and sound effects as I want without having to sacrifice for quality. Storyblocks has proven itself clutch to me time and time again, especially when dealing with client projects, whether it's a drone shot that you didn't get, B-roll shots that you need just to push the project over the edge. Whatever your vision is, you don't need to sacrifice due to time, budget, or bandwidth constraints. Now, my favorite part of Storyblocks is that they hire out creators from marginalized communities to create content that is more reflective of the diverse world that we live in, helping you create more authentically. I'm super proud to have Storyblocks as a part of this channel, so check them out with the link in my description box below. So moving on into some more gear talk, I use my FX3 in conjunction with the Sony 24-70 2.8 and also the 20mm 1.8, which is a ton of fun to use. These elements combine the Sony lenses with the Sony cameras, you're going to get a super sharp image, more so than my taste allows for. You know, I'm not a dad trying to get a super sharp image of a hummingbird sucking the sweet nectar out of a flower. I'm a 27-year-old hipster trying to make everything I shoot look like it was shot on film. So to soften up my images, I'm always scrolling on 1/8 of Tiffin Black Premise on the front of my lenses. I find that is my favorite filter to work with on these projects to soften up. There's plenty out there. You can even take a old UV filter that has a ton of scratches on it and you'll get a similar softer halation-y feel to your footage. Now I want to move on into shooting handheld. Shooting handheld is a big part of my filmmaking style. In taking on the FX3, there was a big worry for me that the camera would be too small and too light to shoot handheld. When your camera is as small as the Sony FX3, when you're shooting handheld, just naturally your body is going to produce all these micro jitters that your camera is going to pick up if it's super small and light. Getting all these micro jitters in your footage is a surefire way to make it seem like today is your first day of your job, which is no bueno, which means no good for my non-Spanish speaking community. It's also not enough for you to rely on the internal stabilization that's inside your camera. To me, if you're relying on that too much, if you have it in the active sports mode, whatever it is, that's gonna, to me, feel pretty unnatural and computerized, because the point of handheld motion is to give your project a more authentic and raw feeling, more natural feeling, and you're not gonna get that with a computerized stabilizing system inside the camera. So to fix that, what I do is add a ton of weight to the camera. When you look at my camera, when I configure it and rig it out for shooting handheld, I'm adding a bunch of elements to it, not only to assist me in shooting, but also to add weight to the camera, such as a 7-inch monitor on the top that has batteries on the back, an arm to hold that monitor, a battery base plate at the bottom, not only giving the camera more juice, but also adding weight to it. And then on the handle, which is honestly poorly designed by Sony, it's too small. I have a little handle extender that's made of metal from Condor Blue that not only extends the handle, makes it easier to hold on to, but it's also, again, adding more weight. So I've been able to get really nice handheld shots with this camera by adding a bunch of accessories and weight to it, which I guess takes away from the small factor that I love so much, but you're able to quickly just take all those elements off, quickly throw it on a gimbal or do whatever you need to. It also helps to shoot on a wider lens when going handheld. When you're shooting wider, you're getting less micro jitters than if you're punched in all the way to 70mm. Now my last and possibly my most important tip for you in getting the most out of shooting on these little Sony cameras is to just properly learn how to shoot something. Composition, lighting, movement, story. You have to take the time to learn all these fundamentals of filmmaking, or it doesn't matter what camera you're using, it's not gonna look good, it's not gonna connect with anyone. So take the time to learn those things and you'll make any camera look good. So yeah, thanks for spending time with me. Thank you Storyblocks for sponsoring this video and supporting this channel and this community. And good luck with your FX3 or A7S III or whatever camera you're using. They're a ton of fun. I love you.